What if I told you the afterlife just got a peer-reviewed paper? Welcome to What If Horizons, where we take impossible questions and shake them until weird science falls out. Today's question: what if ghosts were scientifically proven to exist? Not just, "I swear my attic is haunted." Proof. I mean lab coats and clipboards, Nobel Prize winning, "We need to update the textbooks." Proof. Picture this: a team of researchers publishes a study in Nature titled, "Spectral Entities, Confirmed," and very annoyed about it. Suddenly, centuries of ghost stories go from campfire tales to, well, still campfire tales, but now with citations. Your creepy basement, peer-reviewed creepy. That cold spot in your hallway. Congratulations, you're basically living inside a scientific instrument. But here's the twist: science doesn't just prove ghosts exist. It starts measuring them. Turns out your great Aunt Mildred's ghost isn't rattling chains to haunt you, she's just stuck in an eternal loop of trying to unplug a toaster. And that demon, in horror movies, just a disgruntled medieval peasant who's really tired of people mispronouncing his name. The real chaos begins when we realize ghosts have been here all along, watching, judging, and probably rolling their translucent eyes at our Wi-Fi passwords. Imagine dying only to spend eternity watching someone binge Netflix and eat cereal directly from the box. No wonder they're so cranky. And let's not even get started on the legal system. Can you sue for ghostly harassment? If a spirit possesses your car, who pays the parking tickets? Suddenly, the dog ate my homework gets upgraded to, a poltergeist hid my tax returns. This isn't just a paranormal breakthrough, it's a bureaucratic nightmare wrapped in a supernatural enigma. And we're just getting started. So let's talk about the immediate aftermath of this ghostly discovery. The first 24 hours would be pure chaos. Religious leaders would be hastily rewriting sermons, scientists would be arguing about spectral physics, and your weird uncle would be smugly saying, "I told you so," at every family gathering. Insurance companies would probably have a collective meltdown. How do you calculate risk when haunted houses are now a measurable phenomenon? Actuaries would need therapy. The scientific community would split into factions faster than you can say ectoplasm. One group would demand strict ghost ethics committees. Another would try to weaponize spirits, because of course they would, and a third, more entrepreneurial faction would be designing ghost-powered appliances. Imagine a Roomba that's literally haunted. It not only vacuums your floors but also judges your life choices. Every tech company would suddenly pivot to spirit tech. Apple releases iGhost. It doesn't do anything useful but has a really sleek, transparent design. Tesla comes out with a haunted car that drives itself to locations from its previous owner's life. Amazon's same-day delivery now includes seances, because Bezos absolutely would monetize the afterlife. The most awkward part? All those ghost hunting shows would have to suddenly get legit. No more dramatic night vision footage of dust particles. Now it's just scientists in lab coats calmly noting, "Yep, that's definitely a dead person." Next case. The dramatic reenactments would need to include peer review scenes. Now let's consider the cultural impact. Suddenly, every historical site becomes a potential ghost zoo. The Tower of London, basically a supernatural petting zoo. The White House, forget the Oval Office tour, everyone just wants to see which presidents are still hanging around. Disneyland would have to rebrand as the most haunted place on Earth, though honestly, that might increase ticket sales. The entertainment industry would go absolutely wild. Romantic comedies now feature love triangles with living people and ghosts. Reality shows would have to add ghost wranglers to their cast. Imagine a cooking competition where the judges are all dead chefs. Julia Child giving Gordon Ramsay a spectral dressing down would be must-see TV. Literature would get a complete overhaul. Ghostwriter takes on a whole new meaning. Shakespeare scholars would be fighting over whether to include new editions with annotations from the bard himself. And can you imagine the memoir market? Suddenly every celebrity has a ghost co-author. The tell-all books would be even more tell-all. Even language would evolve. Ghosting, someone takes on a much more literal meaning. Spirit animal becomes a legally binding term. And rest in peace gets replaced with see you in the lab results. The Oxford English Dictionary team would need ghost-proof coffee to keep up with all the new terminology. The fashion industry wouldn't be left out either. Haute couture now includes spectral chic, clothes designed to look good both in our dimension and the afterlife. Designers would be fighting over which shade of translucent is this season's must-have color. And don't even get me started on ghost makeup tutorials. Let's talk about the practical implications for daily life. Suddenly, real estate listings would need to include ghost occupancy rates. That charming fixer-upper might come with a Victorian-era family who never got the memo about moving out. Home inspections would now include spectral surveys. The foundation is solid, but there's a persistent ghost in the master bathroom who really hates modern decor. The job market would explode with new opportunities. Ghost mediators, spectral architects, afterlife psychologists, these would all become legitimate careers. IT support would need to expand to include helping ghosts with their unfinished business services. Imagine the job description. Must be comfortable with both technology and the supernatural. Experience with exorcisms a plus but not required. Education systems would need complete overhauls. History classes could literally have guest speakers from the past. Science classes would need to add spectral physics to the curriculum. Driver's ed would include how to avoid ghostly road rage incidents. And let's not forget about the school lunch program. Do ghosts need to eat? If not, that's a whole new level of lunchroom envy. Even our legal systems would need to adapt. Can ghosts testify in court? What about ghostly rights? Do they get to vote? Suddenly, voter ID laws become a lot more complicated when some of your constituents are translucent. And don't even get me started on ghost taxes. The IRS would have a field day trying to figure out how to audit someone who doesn't technically exist in our dimension. The healthcare industry would face its own set of challenges. Do ghosts need health insurance? Can they get sick? If a ghost haunts a hospital, do they get staff benefits? And what about mental health services? Imagine being a therapist dealing with centuries-old ghostly trauma. So, tell me about your mother, who died in 1672. Now let's consider the international implications. Suddenly, every country has to deal with their ghostly population. Some nations might embrace their spectral citizens, creating ghost-friendly policies and even ghost embassies. Others might try to deport their spirits, leading to some very awkward international incidents. Imagine the United Nations trying to mediate a dispute between two countries over a particularly stubborn ghost that keeps haunting border areas. Tourism would get a complete makeover. Forget visiting the Eiffel Tower or the Great Wall. Now the hottest destinations are places with the most interesting ghosts. Haunted castles would become luxury resorts. Ghost safaris would be the new big thing. And can you imagine the cruise industry? Come sail with us and meet our resident spectral crew members. Though that might not be great for the seasickness rates. The military implications are complicated. Could ghosts be used as spies? Would they be subject to the Geneva Convention? Imagine the arms race that would develop as countries try to weaponize the afterlife. The Pentagon would probably have a whole new department dedicated to post-mortal defense strategies. And let's not forget about space exploration. NASA would have to consider if ghosts can survive in zero gravity. Even sports would be affected. Could ghosts participate in the Olympics? Imagine a basketball game where some players can literally float. The rules of every sport would need to be rewritten to account for spectral abilities. And let's not forget about fantasy sports leagues. Now you can draft players who died decades ago. Though there might be some complaints about ghost players having an unfair advantage. The food industry would face its own unique challenges. Would ghosts need to eat? If so, what do they eat? Would there be a market for ghost-specific cuisine? Restaurants might need to add spectral dining sections. And can ghosts get food poisoning? These are the questions that would keep food safety inspectors up at night. Let's examine the social dynamics that would emerge in this new ghost-proven world. Dating apps would need a complete overhaul. Single ghost seeks living companion for long walks through walls. Your match percentage might now include spectral compatibility scores. Breakups would get infinitely more complicated when your ex can literally haunt you. It's not you, it's... well, actually you're dead now, so maybe it is you? Family reunions would take on a whole new meaning when you can literally invite ancestors dating back generations. Awkward dinner conversations would reach new heights. Great-great-grandpa Jedediah, we've talked about your outdated views on, well, everything. The genealogy industry would boom while simultaneously becoming obsolete. Why research your family tree when you can just ask Uncle Frank's ghost? Office culture would never be the same. Remote work takes on new dimensions when some of your coworkers are technically in another dimension entirely. Performance reviews get tricky. How do you evaluate an employee who died decades ago but still files reports? And think about workplace romances. HR departments would need entire new policies for ghost-human relationships. Schools would need to adapt to spectral students. Does a ghost child get held back if they don't complete their assignments? How do you handle parent-teacher conferences when the parents are from the 18th century? Bullying policies would need revising when the bullied can literally vanish through walls at will. The class pet might be a ghost hamster. Field trips could include visits to the spirit world. Permission slips would need some serious updating. Social media would become even more chaotic. Ghost influencers would dominate platforms, 10th century peasant turned lifestyle guru. Verification badges would need to indicate living status. Imagine scrolling through your feed seeing posts from people who died centuries ago reviewing modern products. This so-called smartphone is no match for carrier pigeons, 0/5 stars. The rise of posthumous content creation would make copyright law infinitely more complicated. Now let's explore the economic earthquake this discovery would trigger. The funeral industry would need to pivot dramatically. Why pay for an expensive burial when grandma might still be hanging around the house? Casket makers would start offering premium haunting packages instead. Florists might switch to selling ghost-friendly arrangements that spirits can theoretically smell. The entire concept of life insurance would need reworking when life becomes a negotiable term. The housing market would experience spectral gentrification. Historic districts would become premium real estate for their authentic period-appropriate ghosts. Home staging would include ghost-friendly decor, consultations. Landlords would face new challenges with supernatural tenants who never pay rent but also never leave. Airbnb would introduce haunted filters, with some guests specifically requesting accommodations with resident spirits. Retail would undergo a bizarre transformation. Department stores might add post-life sections. Fashion brands would release see-through collections for style-conscious spirits. Grocery stores could introduce ghost aisles, selling products from bygone eras, though convincing ghosts to actually pay for anything would be another matter. The concept of shoplifting takes on new dimensions when the thief might be invisible. The entertainment economy would spin off into strange new ventures. Ghostly stand-up comedy clubs would emerge, featuring deceased comedians telling jokes that haven't been funny for centuries. Movie theaters might offer immersive haunting experiences, where the ghosts in the film interact with the audience. Theme parks would build attractions where visitors can temporarily experience being a ghost, though the liability waivers would need to be extensive. Even the financial sector would need to adapt. Could ghosts open bank accounts? Would they need to? The concept of cryptocurrency might appeal to spirits who can't physically carry cash. Stock markets might start tracking haunting index funds. And imagine the complications for estate planning when the deceased can still voice their opinions about how their money should be spent. Inheritance lawyers would never sleep again. Let's dive into the scientific revolution this discovery would unleash. Physics departments worldwide would be scrambling to rewrite textbooks. Turns out Einstein didn't account for casual wall phasing in his theories. The discovery of ghostly energy would create a whole new branch of quantum mechanics, probably called spectronics. Laboratories would be racing to develop the first ghost particle collider, though getting spirits to cooperate with experiments might prove challenging. The medical field would face its own paradigm shift. Doctors would need to consider post-mortem health. Can ghosts get ghost diseases? Pharmaceutical companies would be researching spectral medicine, trying to develop pills that work across dimensional boundaries. The placebo effect takes on new meaning when your test subjects might already be dead. Mental health professionals would need to treat survivor's guilt in patients whose deceased relatives never actually left. Archaeology would become infinitely more efficient. Why dig for artifacts when you can just ask someone who was there? Historians would have a field day interviewing primary sources from every era, though getting them to stop rambling about the good old days might be tough. The Smithsonian would probably start a living history program where ghosts reenact their own lives. Museums might have to return artifacts to their original spectral owners, leading to some awkward conversations. The tech industry would explode with ghost-related innovations. Smartphone manufacturers would add spirit detection modes. Social media platforms would develop afterlife verification systems. Dating apps would implement cross-dimensional matching algorithms. And can you imagine the market for ghost-proof security systems? Banks and government facilities would pay top dollar for technology that keeps curious spirits out of sensitive areas. Even space exploration would be transformed. NASA would need to consider if ghosts can survive in vacuum conditions. The first Mars colony might include spectral members who don't need oxygen or food. Astronomers would debate whether ghosts affect gravitational calculations. And SETI would have to expand its search parameters to include post-biological intelligence. The phrase, space ghost, would stop being just a cartoon and start being a legitimate scientific classification. Now let's ponder the philosophical and existential questions this discovery would raise. Mortality suddenly becomes negotiable. If consciousness persists after death, does that make us immortal or just annoyingly persistent? Philosophers would be arguing whether ghosts qualify as alive, or if we need to invent an entirely new category of existence. Ethics committees would be debating the rights of the deceased. Can a ghost give consent? Do they have civil liberties? The concept of human rights would need to expand to include post-human rights. Religion and spirituality would undergo radical transformations. Every faith would be re-examining their afterlife doctrines in light of concrete evidence. Some might double down on their teachings, others might adapt, and a few might collapse entirely when faced with provable supernatural phenomena. The line between miracle and measurable spectral phenomenon would become dangerously blurry. Prayer might take on new dimensions when you can literally see who's listening on the other side. Our very perception of time would shift. Ghosts living among us would create a strange temporal collage where past and present coexist. Walking down the street, you might see Revolutionary War soldiers mingling with smartphone zombies. History would no longer be something we study, it would be something we literally bump into at the supermarket. The phrase, living in the past, would become meaningless when the past is still hanging around. Personal identity would become infinitely more complex. If your consciousness continues after death, at what point do you stop being you? How much can a ghost change while remaining the same person? Do ghosts experience personal growth, or are they stuck in an eternal loop of their former selves? Therapy would need to expand to help people cope with the existential dread of knowing exactly what comes after death, and that it's not necessarily an improvement. Even our basic concepts of space and matter would need redefinition. When beings can walk through walls, what does solid even mean? Architecture would need to account for spectral traffic patterns. Urban planners would have to design cities that accommodate both living and dead residents. The very fabric of reality would feel less reliable when you can't trust that empty chair to actually be empty. As we reach the end of this thought experiment, one thing becomes clear: proving ghosts exist wouldn't just change a few things, it would unravel the very fabric of how we understand reality. We'd be living in a world where science and the supernatural aren't at odds, but collaborators in rewriting everything we thought we knew. The implications stretch far beyond haunted houses and into every corner of human existence, from how we govern societies to how we define life itself. Perhaps the most surprising revelation is that ghosts, once proven real, would become shockingly mundane. That spectral figure in your hallway, probably just some guy from the 1920s wondering why you never finish your vegetables. The eerie voice in your attic, likely a very bored Victorian ghost complaining about modern music. The true horror might not be their existence, but how quickly we'd adapt to this new normal, making coffee while ignoring the Civil War soldier hovering by the microwave. This mental exercise serves as a reminder that reality is far stranger than we often assume, and that scientific progress has a way of turning our wildest fantasies into everyday facts. Who knows, maybe one day we will peer beyond the veil and discover that the afterlife has been here all along, waiting patiently for us to develop the right instruments to notice it. If you enjoyed this journey into the scientifically verified supernatural, don't keep it to yourself. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What aspect of a ghost-proven world intrigues you most? Make sure to subscribe to What If Horizons for more mind-bending explorations of reality's biggest questions. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next thought experiment, because in a universe full of possibilities, the only limit is our imagination. Until next time, keep questioning, keep wondering, and maybe check behind you occasionally, just in case.